Good morning, Year 9. Here is the answers to Wednesday's lesson. Just a quick run through and go through the words that you weren't sure of and make sure that you have the correct answers. Okay, so previous lessons we've talked about the organization of life, where cells make tissues and tissues make organs, organs make organ systems, and these join together to make an organism. So some of these words that you highlighted on this slide, organelles are the tiny pieces that make up the cells, things like a nucleus, a vacuole. Tissues are groups of similar cells that work together. Organs you seemed okay on. An organ system just means more than one organ doing a job together. Things like in the digestive system, the stomach and the intestines work together to carry out the process of digesting food. And then this other word, organism, just means a living thing. Okay, so for your starter question, I asked you to explain what an organ system was. So if you read the first slide and you'd looked at it, then you knew that it was a group of organs working together. And you gave me lots of great examples, things like the respiratory system, the digestive system. Someone said the integumentary system, the respiratory system. I might have already said that. So loads of examples. We had pictures in a previous lesson of different examples. Then I asked you to watch a video. So if you didn't watch the video, then you were going to find lots of this next part of the lesson harder because you hadn't watched what happened between the mouth and the stomach. Okay, these things aren't put here just for you to skip over. They are put for you to use as part of your learning. Okay, same with these slides where it says highlight any words you don't know. If you just skip over it or you skim read it and you're not really engaging with the work, then you're going to struggle later when it comes to the questions. Okay, so digestion begins in the mouth. This is where the smell of food will trigger your salivary glands. So your salivary glands, I'm not sure if I can just put a little, there's your salivary glands. These basically secrete, that means they produce and they give out saliva, which contains an enzyme. An enzyme is a chemical that will start to break down the food from its long chains into its little chains. Your mouth also contains teeth which chew food, breaking it down into smaller pieces. Then it moves down this esophagus, which sometimes you might call the food pipe. So it's pronounced esophagus, and this carries the food down to the stomach. It is a muscular tube. This means that it's made of muscles, and the muscles can squeeze the food from the top. Like if you had filled your tights with a ball or something and you need to squeeze it down into the foot. So the muscles squeeze the food down the esophagus into the stomach by a series of contractions. So contractions are when your muscles squeeze, and this process is called peristalsis. The stomach contains hydrochloric acid. So it's just a very strong acid which kills any ingested bacteria, any bacteria you've accidentally eaten. And it also produces the protease enzyme, which digests protein. The muscular walls of the stomach contract and churn. So contract, again, means squeeze. So the stomach muscles squeeze, and churn means mix up. So they squeeze to mix up the food, breaking it into smaller pieces. The gallbladder stores excess bile. So bile is a chemical that will break up fat. It will emulsify it. That means make it into little droplets. So it's easier to be digested later on. And then we move down into the pancreas. So the pancreas produces lots of digestive enzymes. The enzymes are the chemicals that break up the food. They are secreted in the top part of the small intestines, and they have different names. So they break down proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. One hadn't heard of carbohydrates. So these are like your starch, basically, starchy foods. The pancreas also makes insulin. Insulin is a chemical that controls your blood glucose levels. So if you have too much sugar in your blood, then it will start a chain of reactions to reduce it. And if you don't have enough sugar in your blood, it's involved in that kind of pathway there, secreting it directly into your bloodstream. Insulin is the chief hormone for metabolizing sugar. So metabolizing or metabolism is a chemical reaction that breaks down or builds up chemicals. So in this case, it's gonna break down or build up the sugar into a storage organ, that type of thing. And then there's 3 different kinds of enzymes that you need to know about. So carbohydrates are broken down by carbohydrase. Fats are broken down by lipase. We often call fats lipids. And proteins are broken down by protease. The small intestine produces protease, so that's the chemical that breaks down the proteins, amylase, which breaks down the starches, and lipase, which breaks down the fats. And this continues the digestion. So we're in this bit here now. Soluble products of digestion are absorbed. Absorbed means that they pass through the intestine wall into the bloodstream. So they go, these little bits here stick out, they basically absorb, they suck in, as if you put like a paper towel down, it will suck up the nutrients into the blood and the walls, which are covered in villi. So the villi are these finger-like projections. If you hold up your hand and wiggle your fingers, that increases the surface area for absorption. The large intestine, so we're looking at this bit here now, connects the small intestines to the rectum. The large intestines is a highly specialized organ. So your rectum is this bit here. Okay, it absorbs water so that your poo becomes a little bit more solid. Poo itself is mostly food debris. So debris is like waste material, bits that are left over, things that can't be digested. If you eat a lot of plants, we can't really digest cellulose, so things like sweet corn and stuff like that will come out in your poo because we can't break it down and absorb it. The rectum is an 8-inch chamber. So the rectum is the very last bit of your intestines. It's where the poo comes. It's where the poo is held before it comes out of your bottom. A chamber is like a cave or a cavern. It's like a hole or a tube in this case. If you think about Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, that was a big empty space underneath Hogwarts School. Okay? The rectum receives stool. Stool is just the scientific word for poo. So it receives poo from the large intestines, and it lets the person know that there is a poo that needs to be evacuated. So when you have a full rectum, your body can feel that you need to have a poo. Evacuated just means going to have a poo. This holds the stool until the evacuation happens. So this is where your poo will stay until you go to the toilet. So I asked you some questions based on that information. Which part of the digestive system produces bile? This was the liver. Which part absorbs water? The large intestines. Which bit digests food and absorbs useful nutrients? The small intestine. Which bit contained the acid? This was the stomach. Okay. The functions of the digestive system. So two main functions, two main jobs. The whole point of digestion is to break down the food so that it's small enough and soluble. Soluble means it will dissolve. So we want it to be small enough to dissolve into our bloodstream, pass through the walls, and then once it's in our blood, it can move around the body and be used for other things. And the other function is absorption. So the whole point of the system is to be able to get those nutrients from the food into our blood. And so it's got special designs for that. This word lumen basically means like the holes. If you think about like a blood vessel, it's the hole in the middle. So it's trying to get it from basically the digestive system, the small intestines, into the blood. Right. So I mentioned throughout all these slides two different things, mechanical digestion and physical digestion. It's sorted into two categories. Physical digestion refers to movements within our body that contribute towards digestion. So this means in mechanical digestion, food is physically broken down into smaller pieces. And this happens where there's chewing and churning by the muscles. The food is still the same. It hasn't changed. It's still, like if you ate a chip, it's still a chip. It's just mushed up into tiny pieces. Chemical digestion refers to breaking down the food into simpler nutrients. So this means that a chemical will break down the food into different molecules. So it was a chip, but now it's glucose and glycerol and fatty acids. It's made up of the tiny components that make it up. Okay, and this happens, so we've got physical digestion in the mouth. The teeth cut and grind the food, which increases the surface area, so later when chemicals react. And it also happens in the stomach, where these muscles squeeze food along in peristalsis. So the strong muscles squeeze the food until it's mashed up into tiny pieces. And then we've got chemical digestion, which involves enzymes. So the enzymes break down the food into small soluble molecules. And we've mentioned the three main enzymes that do this. We've got amylase, which is found in your salivary glands, your pancreas, and your small intestines. These work best at neutral pHs, so wouldn't work very well in the stomach where it becomes quite acidic. We've got proteases that break down the protein, so these are released in the stomach, the pancreas, and the intestines, the small intestines, and they like quite acidic conditions in the stomach. The ones later in the pancreas and intestines work a little bit better towards less acidic conditions. And then we have lipases, which break down the fats, and you can look at these pictures here. So we've got starch, which is a long chain carbohydrate, and amylase will break it down into glucose, which is a simple sugar. We've got long chain proteins, and the enzyme protease will break these down into something called amino acids. And then we have long chain fats, or large molecules of fat, and these will be broken down by lipase into glycerols and fatty acids. So we're taking large molecules, breaking them down into small molecules. And then I asked you to finish off by completing this table. So the mouth moistens food and digests food, and the chemicals used to do this are in saliva. Saliva moistens the food, and inside the saliva is this enzyme called amylase that's going to start breaking down the starches. The esophagus moves food to the stomach. In the esophagus there are no chemicals produced, so it's just a physical movement, a physical squeezing of the muscles to get it to the stomach. In the stomach, food will be mixed, microbes will be killed, digestion will continue, and the conditions, the acid will produce an optimum pH for the enzymes to work. So the chemicals here, hydrochloric acid and protease enzyme. The job of the liver then, which is below the stomach, is to neutralize the stomach acid. Bit of a spelling mistake there. Okay, and also the liver is a storage organ. So when all this extra glucose has been made by breaking down the starch, some of it will be converted and stored in the liver. And to help in the digestion process, the liver is the site of bile production. The gallbladder comes next. This stores the bile until it's needed, but it doesn't produce any chemicals of its own. I'll just go back actually and say, if you didn't write this down or you didn't complete this slide, now would be a good time to pause the video and to make sure you have this information written down on a piece of paper. Okay, moving on then to the pancreas. So this is where the protein is digested that produces the enzymes that's going to happen for the protein digestion. So the pancreas produces loads of enzymes. It produces all three kinds of enzymes, and these then go into the small intestines to digest and absorb the food. Again here, amylase, protease and lipase are being produced, which are going to speed up this digestion process. Once that has happened and all these tiny molecules are made, they will then be absorbed into the bloodstream. So they will pass through the wall of the intestine, the skin of the intestine, into the bloodstream, and then they'll move around the body. The large intestine absorbs water, which will then solidify the waste so that you can poo it out. No chemicals produced here. And the rectum and the anus's job is to release waste, just to get rid of all that waste products. And again, no chemicals are produced here. So if you didn't do this slide, pause the video now, write this down on your piece of paper. And then the final slide, I asked you if you could tell me 3 things you could remember without looking them up from this lesson. Now, I would suggest that if you get here and your answer is nothing, I can't remember anything from any of the slides, then that's the point where you need to go back to slide number 1 and you need to make some more notes, or you need to log on to BBC Bitesize and you need to look the topic up. If you are getting through 18 slides and you can't remember one single fact, then you need to go back to the beginning, or you need to send me an email, okay? We're getting less and less engagement as you just skip through the slides and hand in submit, but I check every single slide. I know who's skipping them and who's trying them, and if you keep skipping them, it's going to get harder and harder and harder, this topic, because you're missing every little bit that you've been asked to do. I know that you can do better. Some of you are doing absolutely fantastic, and I am so proud of you. You are working really hard. You are sending me messages when you get stuck. You are asking for help. Absolutely brilliant attitude to your learning. Some of you know that you can do better, and I hope to see an improvement. in the next couple of lessons. So I will see you tomorrow for the next video with the answers on. Have a good day.